G'day and welcome again to the Campfire Project. And today we have the very first panel discussion with both men and women. As you've noticed recently, I've been interviewing a number of great women and I wanted to bring them together in a discussion, but also have men involved as well so that we can get joint ideas and beliefs and understandings happening. But today, first of all, we have Karen Chaston, CEO of Live, Love by Design and Beyond Loss Life Coach, which is where she helps people to work through their loss and bereavement. G'day, Karen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alan, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm in great company.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. And Pauline Crawford-Omps, CEO of Corporate Heart International, Global Ambassador of Magical Conversations, and author of the book Magical Conversations and also Gender Dynamics, which is soon to be released. G'day, Pauline. Welcome to the show.
It's absolute delight to be here across the world from Las Vegas.
Everyone's hearing your voice and going, oh, England, but no, you're actually moved over to Las Vegas.
I'm a Brit in America.
Excellent. And then we also have John Hope, who is a life and business strategist and also a great mate of mine. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Alan.
Now, it's really good to have all of you here and to get into the subject because, Pauline, you posted the subject for us, which was women wanting to do business. The merging of women into high influence, currently men-only positions, such as boardrooms, politics and in government. And the question that came from that was, how can women achieve this and not lose sight of their unique differences in our nurturing nature and family commitments? So would you like to start us off as to where that question came from and why you thought that was important?
Well, thank you for letting me set that question, because I think it's absolutely crucial. If men and women are going to work together, the key for me is, and live together as well, but the key for me is that they understand their differences. Now, a man's trajectory through life is different to a woman's trajectory through life purely through our biology, that we have different functionality. And if we don't choose to be a mother, as many women don't, but they choose a career, or they choose to be a mother and have a career, there'll be certain things that they bring to the boardroom, not just because of those factors, but because they're biologically different. So in the age today where women really want to be in business, and business is in some places still in the male zone of, unemotional, profit-driven, very structured, how do we allow women to get into that place without drowning out their natural needs? Because I believe that these are the things we need to bring into the boardroom. But the question to you guys and Karen as well is, why do we not understand each other yet? Why is there such a big divide between what we think we need in business and what we allow to come in?
Well, Karen, you've been a CFO in a major corporation, and
Yes.
you also went through a lot of life change yourself in that role and brought now different understandings into the boardroom. So how would you respond? What's your ideas around that?
Well, my ideas are obviously living that life and being, a lady. In most boardrooms I was the only female in there. I wasn't one of the directors, but I was obviously as a CFO. I attended most of the board meetings. And I found that I turned very masculine in my role, in my climb to the top. I lost sight of me. My health ended up suffering. And sure, I did have other tragedy events that happened. But it comes back to women knowing who they are. And I think a lot of women do not know who they are. They haven't taken the time to live and love themselves. And this isn't from a vanity point of view. It's from when I know who I am and I know where I want to be, you then have the design to actually take the steps to get there. But you do it using your own traits, and which are common to females. So you're not going to squash other women and become the notorious, gender sort of specific that most people don't like in business of females, because you actually are on a mission to understand that together we make a difference. So by knowing who you are setting the framework of to actually get there and studying ways that actually do work and the ways that don't. And I don't care what anyone says. The current form of the boards, they don't work. They don't even work for the men.
Yeah.
You just look at the health of the men. You look at the suicide rate of men. It's not working, and the long hours that are expected, that are away from the family, is not working on any level. That's my view.
Yeah, because the way I see it is we're looking at men and women trying to find the issue there when it's really not that. It's the environment in which we're working with is the problem.
Yes.
Now, in my role, I didn't really have, in all the industries I've been in, I've never understood the issue around men and women, because every woman who worked in the same organisations I worked in, all got exactly the same wages. So they fitted into those groups quite effectively. And it would just seem to work together. But I haven't been in that boardroom situation with them. John, what sort of things have you found in your work experience?
Well, as you know, Alan, I had 20 years in the police, and in that, when I went into the police was, when was that? I don't know, 30 years ago. The one thing that, all this equality, and also the race thing too, you know, like they wanted equality, like with Aboriginality and different things, which I'm not against. But the one thing I wanted to get into in the police was into the dog squad. Now, the one thing that they would not employ for the next 20 years was an Anglo-Saxon male. And that was purely because it was made up. They had to show equality by who was in those roles, which I'm not against. That's a timing thing. Bad luck for me. I still kicked on and had a good time. Like you said, Alan, I worked a lot with females. They were, and more females were coming into the police force. And if I stop myself there, policing is a common sense thing, not so much an education thing. And women are better coppers than men, because everything you go to in a police situation is an argument. Women argue better. Men get the shits and they want to throw punches. Women are better arguers, and they make better coppers. And I was also in a training role, so I'd always get the new people out of the academy. I'd work with a woman ahead of a bloke every time, because I'm not a small bloke, but a lot of small blokes came in. Again, equality, they had to get rid of the height restriction. Women come in and they expect to get into a shit fight. Sorry, but you know, that's what it tends to be. And they expect to have someone angry in front of them and throw punches. They react better because they expect it. You get a smaller bloke, they tend to come in and go, "Oh, hang on, I've got someone bigger here to back me up." And I've got countless stories of small women who have saved situations purely because of their determination. So I don't see, and it was all equal. So I don't see a difference between that as between men and women. But as Pauline said, Pauline, did I get it right? Yes, Pauline said, we're different. Now, what happens is, you know, we got chemical things that go on in our body. One of us is estrogen based, one of us is testosterone based. You know, and that has an effect in a conflict situation. But what women would come in and do the arguing and see the things that happen in the police. But once they had children, it changes their chemical balance. All of a sudden, their nurturing thing comes in. Those things that they've seen come like, I suppose, back like a PTSD thing. And all of the people I call corridor creeping cake eaters, you know, the people that are in the offices because they can't deal with the front line anymore. I'm talking strictly police, not places in general, are 95% women. Only because all of a sudden their whole mindset changes because they're all about nurturing and kids. And like that's I don't know, that's like a psychology thing that people, but they're aware of it, but no one does anything about it. You know, and I'm talking strictly from a policing role. And if I go to a business role, my mother was the best business person I've ever met. She's run a chemist shop. When I say a chemist shop, she had 20 staff. She's also run a bottle shop for years. She was amazing. Behind the doors, she was a very violent, abusive alcoholic. But business-wise, there was no one better. You know, I've left the police. I got in. I ended up buying the bottle shop off her, and countless business things that I go to. I've never met anyone that could tell me something that she hadn't already told me. And because the lessons, as we've said before, weren't that pleasant, they sort of stick with you. So, I think it comes down to, as Karen and Pauline said, you've got to understand we are different, you know, and it's equal. We can do the same job, but it affects us differently. And, you know, if people sit there, and I'm all for equality, I don't think men are better than women or women are better than men, but people that say that we're the same, well, okay, how come we've got different toilets? Yeah, you know, common sense has got to come in there.
Yeah.
So, I think you need to, like, it's not black or white, it's grey.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, with policing, women are better police. But once they get to that point where they have kids and the nurturing aspect comes in, what they've already done affects them more than it does a bloke.
Yeah.
I think with blokes, we go through change, but we don't go through as dramatic a change as the women go through. And so it's probably more obvious that what we notice with them. And because even if we look at generations, we look at, say, Gen Y, for instance, or any generation, as they come into their earlier years, they're a certain way. But when they get to that point where they've now got a family, they've got mortgages and everything else, their attitudes change. So the younger Gen Ys are different to the older Gen Ys.
Yeah.
There seems to be an age at which these things kick in generally across the board. But with women, it's also then those time events of having children and all of that have an effect as well. And that's something that you mentioned there, Pauline, was the nurturing and nature and the nurturing side and the family commitments, how that impacts on women in business as well.
Well, it does. And it also, there is evidence that, you know, as we get older, we grow out of the young children and we grow into the elderly parents support system. And although you guys are really good, there is evidence that majority it's a woman who looks after the emotional needs of the aging parents. So the woman she's pulled three ways. You know, she's got her grown-up children, then grandchildren, then she might have elderly parents, and she's got business, and she really wants to get to the boardroom. You know, there are lots of cases of women who opt not to have a family, specifically because they want to achieve that top role, and that's fine too if that's what they want to do. I think the challenge I have is that the imbalance in the world now is polarized, because these traditional corporate environments, like corporate America for sure, the stats are that there are, you know, there's in the Fortune 500 there are less than 30 CEO females. So, and you've got the same in England, and I don't know in Australia, but
it's the same in Australia.
Yeah, and it's the same with world politics. Out of 160 countries, you know, there are only 30 countries run by women. So the question is not, should it be women running it? Not at all. But how do we understand the best people and how do we change the territory so that we can make fundamental changes? Because people are very polarized about everything now, and everybody's arguing too much. And that's my point of view with a magical conversation, is that for a magical conversation, you need to come to it without a judgment. That's my first rule. So if you come to it without judgment, what is your bias about women and men being in the same room before you even start the conversation? And if you have, I interviewed 40 men, including you, Alan, about what do men feel about men today. And the biggest commonality was they all said they felt confused about women. And could they please, you know, not be smothered? Could you please leave me alone and let me do what I need to do, etc., etc. Now, I take that on board, and I think it's very valid. But as John said, you know, we're made to work together, and some jobs we actually do better than the other, and then it's a swap round. I don't want to be a lumberjack. I don't think that's a very good role for me as a woman, but you know, maybe I could be a policewoman. I mean, we've got to have conversation in order to get past our blocks. That's my feeling, that sometimes people don't know what they don't know. and they don't even understand that they don't know what they don't know. They've just been so locked into one way of thinking that they just think that's the way things should be. And it seems very apparent to me now that women want to do a good job, then they are very good at business, whether it's in the police force or in commercial life. And they also want to hold their traditional family in their hearts as well. Can we allow that?
Yeah,
And I think we need to say yes.
Yeah, when we look at why there's not as many women as there could be, not as I wouldn't say as there should be, but as there could be.
Yeah.
Because that would get back to being the right person for the job, regardless of who they are. But why do so many women not get to those roles? What do you think the main reason behind all that is?
I think in trying to look at the numbers, I feel that it's two ways. One is that the door is closed by men who want to stay there, and sometimes women approach the door wrongly and hammer on it in the wrong way, so we get a bad rap. But I think we have to change the whole thing and say, what is the rap? You know, what is it we're looking for? Now, there's one of the Scandinavian countries, and I can't remember what, but I read a story that they were several companies which officially employed both a male and a female in the CEO role. And it wasn't a joint role, it was two people leading jointly, not
Sounds like
half
marriage.
and half, you know, and that was specifically to hold both views.
Wow.
Extra cost.
Wow.
And how did that, what were the results? How did that run for them?
It worked really well, but as we know, Scandinavian countries have very different cultures around family. So they have very strong family value-based cultural norms. So it worked really well.
Well, when you've got a relationship with somebody, and you're male and female, and they're supportive of each other, one's going to be up when the other one's down, and they'll bring each other up. They'll also have particular gifts that are suited to certain situations that the other one is not so much gifted for, but then it switches around the other way. So it becomes a partnership. So if we get a really, and I've met some really lovely people who have been with their partners for 50 years. And the look of love and connection they've got in their face is still so strong. And I wonder, well, how could the rest of us get that into our relationships? And I thought, well, how would that work if we had those relationships in business?
Yeah.
That connection and respect for each other. Because when we talk about women possibly approaching the door the wrong way, they talk about the glass ceiling. Is that something that men built, or it's something that women have perceived and therefore kept running? Is it
I think it's probably and.
Yes.
I think it's a bit of both. Don't you think so, Karen?
Yes, I do. And look, and I'm really glad the fact that over the last probably 10 years, unconscious bias has actually become a phrase that most people are aware of, because a lot of men don't even realise that they do have this unconscious bias. You know, as soon as a female gets married in the workforce, they are automatically labelled, well, within the next few years, she'll be pregnant, she'll be gone. Maybe we won't spend the time developing her the way that we would her male counterpart. And little things like that, whether it's actually spoken out loud, it's certainly in their psyche, in the way that they think.
Yes.
And so there's all those little trends, and a lot of women complain about that. They have no intention of having children at the age that they're at, and they think, well, they have time. But how many women think they have time and they get to their late 30s and then they realise, oh my God, I may have missed the boat. I'm not becoming pregnant as quickly as what I would like to, and maybe I have made the wrong choice over time. So there's all these things that come into it that people need to understand. And as I said earlier, I think the whole boardroom concept is going to change. I think when all these white-haired men die off, who are baby boomers.
Is that you, Alan?
I'm just checking the colour.
Well, you
No,
know
the rinse
what I
is
mean.
working.
Their way of thinking, their way of doing business. And, you know, when Pauline and I were talking before we actually started this conversation, you know, Simon Sinek, he's an amazing person. And his book comes out in June called The Infinite Game.
Yeah.
And it's about business changing everything. And the main concept is the trust. Like, do we trust our employers? Do we trust the fact that what they say will actually happen? And, you know, and the way he said is employees should come first, customers second, and the shareholders third. Most people have it the other way around. Most business have it the other way around. And as he says, they're playing a finite game instead of the infinite game. Business should have the mentality that we will go on forever.
That's right.
Just recently, unfortunately, I've had some really bad dealings with Telstra, and as a customer and a shareholder, I said to them, you guys are not playing the infinite game. And seriously, you will not be here in 10, 20 years if you don't change the way that you're doing business. You have to start looking about your employees first. The employees just lie to you, and they just tell you whatever you want to hear just so you can hang up. Which is not a way to do business. And I don't want to get on the subject of Telstra, but that's what I'm saying is it's the fact of the people at the top are not playing the proper game. And if they were, they would see that employees come first and they would realise the best person for the job. They would wipe away all of the other, the gender, the race, everything else.
Yeah, well, if you put
the job.
Yeah, if you put the staff first, the employees first, then of course they're going to have a better connection with the customers, and the customers are going to be more loyal. They're more likely to spend more money. You can value add to them, etc. And then the shareholders get a lot more out of it. So by putting the employees first, you're also putting the this is what people don't understand when they say, oh, put this one first, everybody else has to be behind it, because we think about this race 1, 2, 3. Whereas by putting the employees first, you've actually put the shareholders first as well.
Yeah, and also the other thing to remember is that the commercial customer, the consumer, is female.
Yes.
You know, the major consumer of the world now, whether it's a car or a house or whatever, is invariably the woman making the decision, even if the man is paying the bill.
Exactly.
That's what these guys at the top don't realise.
Yeah, well, when it comes to technology and that, I might argue with that one on that, because boys and their toys, you want to see all the devices I've got around the place.
I know, but
women will still research the technology as much as they will every other decision. So they will be involved with the most of those decisions, saying, well, you know, what's the review on this? What's the review on this? Before they actually do purchase anything. And I think technology as well.
Yes, and then I don't know whether you follow our friend in China, Jack Ma. Jack Ma, who built Alibaba, he's 45% of the workforce are female.
Yes.
And he said, you're mad if you don't employ females, because they're the ones who have got the technical mind and the heart logic. You know, they have what he calls LQ, love quotient.
Oh, I like that one.
Very wise man.
Yes.
And even his management are 40% female. So he's, you know, it's about being, as what Karen says, it's about being wise about the changing nature of business. And I think the thing that worries me, although we talked about the silver-haired die-outs, some of those really corporate cultures are so profit-driven. Some of those values have been driven down into X-Gen and even millennials who would get very materialistic. And that really worries me, because, you know, the enlightened people who are now out in the entrepreneurial field are all understanding this awareness of women and men being equally bright. So we still have to have some serious conversations about changing the whole territory. You know, it is the campfire. You know, if I could, I would change every single square boardroom table to a round one.
Yes.
You know, you've got to change the environment. You've got to make it different. You've got to get them out of their suits and into an environment, and understanding that, you know, like the Bransons of the world, they build business based on people. And it still makes a lot of money.
No, to sort of break down some of those barriers, they had a lot of weekend warrior type events. They go off and they would get out with nature, but even those became competitions. You still had the hierarchy and everything else. Whereas I know that Richard Branson has always said instead of the pyramid that way, it was the other way around, and he was at the bottom. The most important were at the top, and that was his front line. You know, because if you don't have your front line connected to your clients, you're not going to have your clients for long. And I put a post up on LinkedIn earlier last year, and it was around that, take care of your employees and they'll take care of your business. And it went berserk with the responses from different business people. There was one gentleman who was a locksmith who kept on saying, well, you've got to have customers before you can have clients, before you can have employees. Employees don't matter. And I said, well, you were a single operator. You were the employee. And if you're in a bad attitude, how did that affect your customers? You should have a better understanding of this because you were right on the front line. You were the front line.
Yeah.
Staff are an investment. I've got, staff, and one of the things I've always done with, like Pauline was saying, there's a lot of women and, pregnancy becomes something. We got a lot of legislation in Australia that sort of says you can't stop employing someone because they're female and they are at a point where they may be having kids, and they also have rights to come back to work at a certain time, and they get payment things, and that can crush a small business, but government jobs, I think it's a good thing. But one of the things I was taught was one of the best employees you get to work small amounts of hours. I've got a bottle shop, which to you, Pauline, would be an offie, and they you're doing segmented shifts, so you're not doing a full day's work. I use a lot of casual staff, and people with kids at home are usually your best people because they can usually arrange something to look after the kids and come in for 3 to 5 hours, but they also relish the opportunity, like they do twice the work of someone else. So I think they're an absolute gain. But that's here. Like it's probably different in Las Vegas. I don't know. But I think.
Well, I agree with you, John. I think it's about thinking things differently. Like you say, some people are very valuable, but somebody else might not think they're valuable.
Well, staff are an investment. You invest in staff, and like anything in life, you've got a good or a bad investment. Now, you get rid of a bad investment. I know that with my staff, we sort of have more of a family environment where we socialise together and everyone looks after each other. And I encourage people, it's about the money you bring home each week, because everyone works casual, and I encourage them to swap a shift, not just work with someone else. So you're still maintaining your money coming in. And I find that works very well. But if you don't invest in your staff, like if there's a problem, you've got to get down to their level and go through it with them. You just can't. It's not a pass and fail environment. The more time you invest in them, the more valuable they become.
I was going to say, the more valuable they become for someone else as well down the road, because it's only for those certain years when the children are young that they want those sort of limited hour jobs. Whereas once the kids are at school, and obviously, let's face it, the 18 years goes very quickly, especially, I've got my kids in their 30s, and it's like, God, where did the time go?
Yeah.
And you actually, it's only for a short period of time, and you want to be able to then go on and build a career, whether, owning their own bottle shop or doing something else. Mm-hmm. So it's about investing in them, not just for yourself, but for their future employers, or them becoming a future employer.
Mm. But I think also, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's also about, like you were saying, it's about investing in what they can do today, and not looking at their credentials, because that's the other reason that women get blocked from the top. That the competency says, well, you need to have been in business this long, and you need to have got this high, and because they chose to have the children and spend time out doing something else, they haven't got that criteria. But actually, they've got all the skills, and they got a different mindset that's probably at 45 is ideally suited to the stress and strain of a higher level, but we have to change the criteria and get out of our old thinking. And that's the block that I think is in the boardroom at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's right across education as well, because what do? We train kids up to learn subjects. They spend 13 years at school, extra years at TAFE and university to get a piece of paper that they think this is what their whole life's about. That piece of paper only gets them through the door for the interview. It doesn't get them the job. It's their emotional intelligence that gets them the job. It's the emotional intelligence that keeps them there. So, and we hear all the time, we should employ people on attitude and train for skills.
Yes.
But what are we doing? We're trying to hire them on skills and then hope their attitude's right. So we focus on the attitude side of it first of all, and that, I believe, will give women a lot greater chance of getting in there, because the experiences that women have quite often are much broader than men. And so they bring a lot more to the table.
Yes.
So I think it's changing that side of it, looking at education, the way we do it, how we apply for jobs. But Karen, you also mentioned about the infinite and finite business. Can you explain a little bit more about that so the people who are listening to it understand what the difference between the two is?
Okay, so, and I'm taking the explanation from Simon Sinek, and why wouldn't I? He's an amazing guy, and he's a great, innovative thinker. And he said, in a finite game, something like a game of chess, okay? We know how long it's going to go for, roughly. We know there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser, and the game is going to end. And most people in business, when you set up your business, you don't want there to be an end. The only reason there may be an end, why businesses fail, is because they give up, it gets too hard, they give up, or they run out of resources. But if you're setting up a business to be an infinite business, it will go on forever and hopefully past your time. Let's look at Henry Ford, okay? He obviously set his business up to be infinite. And sure, there's another discussion in all of that, but it is still running today. But that's where most people are playing a finite game at the moment. They are looking at the year, which is an arbitrary variable in it, and they're saying, over this year we will make so much money and you will get your bonus based on this, and this is what we will do. Whereas, and it's so arbitrary and it's so limiting thinking. As he said in one of his videos that I watched, he said it needed to be 15 months, not 12 months, because they were on a roll to make the money that we were going to, and I could see that it was going to happen. If I had stopped them at the 12-month mark, they would have given up and not reached their goals. And that's what business needs to be thinking about continually, is about who you are and what you value. And knowing what you value and making sure everyone in your workplace not only values what the company values, but they live up to those values. Their word becomes their bond. And the fact that this is what we're doing and this is where we're going. And employees then are in an environment where they have trust, they love coming to work. And what happens then? When you love going to work and you trust it and you know that no one's trying to bring you down, everyone's working together, you'll become more innovative, you'll become more profitable. And he actually said that he's changed, there is no profit line on his balance sheet. He's changed the word to freedom. Now, how amazing is that? Because what does freedom give you? It gives you the capacity to actually say no to clients that you do not want to work with. It gives you the capacity to work with people who really can't afford your normal rates. It gives you a capacity to go on holidays, to actually pay your staff more. So the whole attitude of changing the way that we think about business and realising that it all starts with your employees, the way you look after them. There's also another great guy, his name's Stephen Aristotle, and he owns Tower Paddleboards. And he wrote a book called The 5-Hour Workday. And in his business, he brought his business down to 5 hours. Sure, some days they won't, but what he found in making all of his employees figure out how they could do their role in 5 hours. And he also said in the start of the book, everyone only works 5 hours, right? They're there for 8 or 10 or 12, but they're working 5 hours. So why not have them there only 5 hours? Give them back the most valuable resource, which is their time, and you will find that they'll become healthier, which means they'll be more energized. It will also means that they're actually thinking 24/7 how they can continually up the level of the way they do their role. So they're really still working for you 24/7 because they're continually thinking, if I tweak this, this will be better, this will be quicker. And that's the way we're so limiting our employees from their innovation and their way of getting joy. And every single person wants to be able to see their fingerprint on the pie or on the design of whatever they're building together. And most employees cannot see their fingerprint anywhere. And most of us know that, the employers bring in this new system and it doesn't work because they never ask the employees who have to use this system, and it doesn't work. And it's like, but if you'd asked me, we could have just tweaked this and it would have worked.
Yeah, because when you've got those employees who are just working those 5 hours a day, they're thinking, well, how can I keep improving things? Well, maybe I'll get a 4-hour day. And
exactly.
They're thinking of all these different ideas. They're now invested in the business. Whereas in most organisations, what do? They bring a new CEO in. The first thing that happens is they right-size the organisation. Love that term. They also then look at cutting all the costs and everything else. And the conversations I've had with CEOs that have taken on that role, they said, well, what was your priority? And they said, well, it's to the shareholders. So I said, you probably robbed the shareholders then. Because in doing that, anybody who's been bullied at work, their performance drops about 70%. And that's one thing. And those people who are gone, they may feel that they were bullied out of the job. But they also know that anybody who observes bullying, their performance drops by 40% because they're worried about how it's going to affect them. They're emotionally connected to it as well. So now a management has to start micromanaging their people because the people are only doing what they have to do to get by. So the end result is usually when they right-size a business in that particular way, they lose income very quickly. And it takes them anything from 12 months to 18 months to bring it back. And the only reason that is that the people who are still there are now realising, I do have a job because I've been here. That happened 18 months ago.
Well, no one can thrive when they're in survival. And you put your employees into survival, it's just naturally we go into our automatically hindbrain sort of mentality and the whole lot of it. So nothing is going to thrive. So your business is not going to thrive once you do that to your employees.
So the end result is you've created micromanagement within the organisation. And so we go, okay, we've got to get away from the micromanagement because that just creates more managers and we lose all our leaders, they disappear. So how do women in this particular situation come in and add to that solution to that situation? What ideas have you got around that? Because women are, as we said, we're not the same, we are complementary and we all bring something different to the table. So because there's not many women in business in number-wise per capita, by bringing more women in, how can women change that scenario?
Well, I'd like to answer. I think women bring this ability to be very tangential in their thinking. So generally, men think in very straight lines and compartments, and women think in circles and tangents. And this is why often the woman is not heard in the boardroom because the men are all agreeing with each other on a project, and she comes off on a tangent and they don't know where she's going. So again, once the two parties have a baseline understanding that they're dealing with two territories which align, just like putting a PC and a Mac together, that's the core drive. That's a core driver, and then the conversations come on the top. So for men who understand that at a certain point in the conversation, the intelligent man on that boardroom would go, now let's ask the woman about the tangent here, and let's listen, because it could be useful. So she gets the joy of coming in, creating a new idea, and then the conversation can continue. So the idea with that conversation piece is that we don't all become the same, but we value our differences in how we maybe go in straight lines or curved or tangents or up and down. But the awareness is the key to the conversation. The creativity and there's a lot of evidence, the creativity comes from mixed teams. They say that a mixed team which understands each other is the most creative. The second most creative team is a woman's team, and the third is a man's team. And I'm just taking research. I'm not having a go at you guys.
Fighting words.
But in today's world, it's reference to today's world, because today's world is very fluid. You've got 24/7 working, you've got global connection, you've got technology, you've got everything which is fluid. So if men listen to women, that fluidity could add to the business creation.
Have you heard of Alan Pease?
What?
Alan Pease. He's the
Alan Pease. Yeah,
I've seen him a number of times live, and he's got a book, something of why men can't do something and women can't read maps, because of the map argument. And it comes down, like we were talking before, we're different, you know, like.
Yes.
And the classic argument is when you're in a car, and you're driving somewhere, and you can't find where it is. The male's usually driving, the female gets the you know, this is before we had these maps on our phones and stuff, and get the map, and she'd start turning it, and the male gets cranky because the male already has the part of the brain where he doesn't need to turn it. So he'd stop, he'd get the map frustrated, and then he had to turn the stereo down because he's got the monotasking brain. He can't listen to the stereo and read the map at the same time, and then she gets angry at him. What'd you turn the stereo off for? And and that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It's just that we bring different things to the table.
Well, we do, and I mean his books are very good. But now there are so many women involved. Not all women are the same, and not all men are the same. So we have to.
His formula is 1 in 4.
The basic is very true there.
Yeah, it's when you said before about the group working together, and then you've got the women's group and then the men's group, regardless of where the bottom two are, the men and women are. The fact that I love that when you talk about the one at the top is where we complement each other and working together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the key there is being aware. So even if being aware is that if anything happens that you think is not like you, then you stop and say, maybe that's useful.
Yeah, when we talk about the silver-haired executive, etc., and that who has that attitude of fear of having women in there, the astute one, the one who's aware, is going to realise that they're not losing their position by having the women there. They're actually showing their leadership qualities well above everybody else.
Yeah.
So they should be proud of the fact that, hey, they can embrace the woman and say, look, we need to hear your views. We need to see how we can incorporate this into the business. Because to get complementary.
Let me give you a very quick example. I'm working with an executive woman who was in 2 executive boards. One was run by a very bullet point man. The other was run by a very feelings oriented man. And she said it was really interesting. In both boardrooms, it would be different. So the bullet point man wouldn't really invite them to share, whereas the other one would. So there's a frisson of granality in there now. And really the men talking to each other is also a key issue. As we talked, Alan, about different types of men understanding how to help each other. And then we'll sort the women out, Karen.
But everything, I think, comes down to trust.
Trust, it does, yes.
Like, if you trust who you're working with, you'll be open, you'll be honest, but you'll also be more likely to work together, to truly build something together, because you know it doesn't matter who gets the credit for it, it's a team. And that's what I think comes down to everything. And I just think the way the boards are, even the individual people, whether it's all male or what, they really don't trust each other.
I agree.
They're all watching their backs. That's all they're worried about is, you know, they'll say this to my face and they'll do this behind my back and all that sort of stuff. And and that comes down to the fact that they don't even value the fact that we are all different. There's nothing wrong with being different. It's just different.
It's good.
Yeah, it's great, because there's an infinite number of ways of doing anything. So why is your way the right way? And that was one thing that I learned the hard way, and I cringe about the way that I used to, when I was in my corporate role, always go, this is the way to do it. I do it really quick and it's got to be done this way, which is total BS. And I just cringe at the fact that the way I treated people by not allowing them to have their own innovation and their own way of doing things. And I feel that's the way a lot of the corporate culture is. This is it, and do not stray from that.
Yeah, well, I was talking to an executive not too long ago, and I'd asked him how long he'd been with this particular company, an old mate, and he said, well, I've been there for 6 quarters. And I finally realised what he was telling me was he'd been there for 18 months because everything is run by the quarter. You haven't hit your KPIs by the end of that quarter, you're worried about your position. So when you run people like that, or call centres where people have to bundy on and bundy off to go just to the toilet, and going to the toilet affects their KPIs.
Yeah,
I wonder why people don't want to work in the roles that they're in.
yeah.
No.
And you have
Like
middle
this
level
micromanagement.
management as well, and they're the ones that start this. Like one of the key areas when I was in the police was they had to do maximising performance. Now, when you're maximising the performance, you open up a world of bullying because you find someone that's done something wrong, especially in policing role. You always can make a bad decision, and you still have to be accountable for it, and you are. But what they do is then they start putting you on some sort of program, which is basically a bullying program. They micromanage you, they make you do things, and at the end of the day, they get a job promotion for bullying. And that is also seen in the corporate world, which it just doesn't work. And that was to get away from the old mateship thing, you know, in the police where we'll get him a sergeant or an inspector's job because he's a good bloke. So they tried to get away from it, but they just created an atmosphere for bullies. And I know we've spoken about that before, Alan, but that was one of the things that I got out. I had an opportunity to get into that area, but the one thing I wouldn't do, I'd never bully someone, you know, especially staff. I was more invested in anyone that worked under me, and I still am today. So I think you've got to be careful the way you set something like that up, because as we were talking about before, you've got to look at them like an investment. You've got to look. You've got to care for the people, guy or girl, makes no difference. You know, it doesn't matter. It's about being. Well, it's about caring. And as you guys were speaking before, women are naturally more gifted at caring than men. You know, not all men, not all women, but
generally,
across the board, women are more creative for that. I suppose, you know, it's in their I don't know, it's their hormones more directed from that.
In their nature.
As you say,
Whereas our hormones are to go and punch someone, kill an animal, drag it back and eat it. You know, and we haven't evolved.
It's in our DNA,
yeah. So
well, we can see a lot of people doing business exactly that way, trying to kill the beast in that finite method system, as Karen has already mentioned. So what advice, I want to give both the women who are listening to this, what advice would you give them if they're going into business, or if they're already in there, how to handle that, but also to the executives within the boardroom, what advice would you give to those male counterparts as well? So, Pauline, would you like to start us off?
I think for the women is to be truly aware of what their own talents are, you know, understand what their natural talents are, and whether that's through learning in a program, whatever, but find a very wise coach or a good program, but be okay about being a woman in business. And whether you're a masculine-minded woman or a feminine-minded woman, but know your core traits. Are you good at detail? Are you good at languages? Are you good at design? Are you good at strategy, or whatever it is? And be okay about that. And be aware that the world is changing, and that there is evidence about how women are progressing. I find that women like evidence, you know, that, you know, when you put women in the boardroom, it does produce better ROI and shareholder value and all this stuff. So quote that. And for the men, and this is where I'd approach a man, is to be open-minded to the possibility that the additional women are going to add to the business, not detract from it. And that today, it's you know, you can again find evidence everywhere that the nature of the markets are changing, the nature of everything is changing. Half the world are female, the consumer is mainly female. It's such a business strategy to find out how you can integrate the women into your world. And I know there's a case at a big pharmaceutical where one department head did it deliberately. He embraced women, put them in quite strategically, not emotionally, and his figures went out the roof. And all the other departments were going, how did you manage that? And he said, I placed women strategically and watched the change. So that's what I would advise. But for women, definitely know yourself and be okay, and never put another woman down.
Yeah, that's right. Raise them up. All I'd add is for the men to realise that women don't want to get rid of men.
No.
Like they want to work with men, but they want to work with men on an equal basis. And I think then that's what men need to realise. It's not about women getting to the top to just throw all the men out. It's not that at all. I'm a mother of sons. And, you know, it's understanding that we want to come to the table because we have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And it is all about, you know, creating, as Simon Sinek says, making that freedom line grow on the balance sheet. And it's together we can make a difference.
Fantastic. Thank you. And John?
I think the focus has got to be on, there's a big difference between leadership and management. And leadership principles are something that often go undiscussed and unlooked at. Like we talked before about micromanaging someone, and then they try and put that into a leading role. It's not a leading role, it's a managing role, you know, and you got to get leadership principles. It doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, whatever the job is, you need to have those leadership principles in place. And people follow leaders, they don't follow managers. So if you want to create an environment, you know, a working environment with people under you, then that comes from leadership. It doesn't come from management. Management's something when you've got a problem. Leadership's what gets you ahead. You know, I've never heard of an army that had a manager at the front of it, or a country that had a manager at the front of it. They had leaders. So it's and we're talking about leadership on a smaller role. You know, there's so many things out there. Like one of the books I immersed myself in was J.C. Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's a fantastic book. Anyone who wants to get into some sort of company or where they're leading people, that's like, I don't know, the duck's nuts. it's there's no fluff. It's straight down the line. So I think where we're talking about Bruce Lee, like I'm an avid martial artist. Bruce Lee had a tail, like, if you know, it's like a finger pointing to the stars. You know, if you focus on the finger, then you miss the heavenly glory. So I think if you don't focus on your leadership, if you focus on management and the problems, you're not focusing on the big picture, and you don't get ahead without focusing on the big picture. So, yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts.
And I think that comment matches up with what Karen said too about the infinite game. When you've got that, you're focusing on that, not just in a time base, but going on and not really seeing an end to it. So growing. My comments to leaders would be, or men in business, is to look at, you get all your resources and you work with those. You can do a better job when you've got more resources. So it's worth going out and checking and seeing what the women bring to the table, but making sure when they bring it to the table, they're not bringing it to the table in the way that the men have delivered it, because we get the problems then of where the women are delivering it the wrong way. We want to get the best from the women. So we want them to deliver it in that feminine way that they do it. So we need more women in those roles, and we need the women to come in, stop looking at the glass ceiling and feeling it's there, because that will create it stronger again. But look at, well, okay, if there is a barrier there, how do we get around that barrier? Because every barrier's got edges. And it's how do I get around that? Focus on the other side of it, not the barrier itself.
Yeah.
For the business people to realise that, hey, work with those women in a way in which you dissolve the edges of those barriers as well, and everybody's a winner.
And women need to speak up. They need to really say what they want to say, and stop saying yes to everything. Think about it. Just speak up, and then, you know, go there. And if you want a role, if you can see a better way of doing something, use your voice. Don't just, you know, wait till a man comes up with it and you go, oh, I thought about that. It's like, no, speak up, you know, because the ideas come to a lot of people. So use your voice, and don't be afraid to say there may be a better way to do this. Have you considered this?
And without saying a better way, say an alternative way of doing it.
Yeah, that's even better. Thank you, Alan. Because
it's taking words away, because they say that men aren't emotional. Well, we don't show our emotions, but we are extremely emotional. We've just got it all pushed down and hidden. And so anything that's sort of floating around that looks like a slight little challenge, like a little tadpole, all of a sudden has become a bloody alligator or a shark to us. because
I think
don't have those conversations, as you said, Pauline, the magical conversations. We're not having those, and
yes.
that's what we should be getting back to. Looking at
and also the other key, Alan, is your statement, which is #we2.
We
So it's
together.
all about we together. You know, what Karen was saying is, I've got one idea, but let's look at how we can do this together. So it's
And
not my
encourage
idea or
everybody
your
to
idea.
join in that conversation, because when it comes to profiling, there's a particular trait that I know at school and in young ages gets put down all the time. But that one trait, and Karen, you know which one I'm talking about here, judgment variation, coming up with the ideas that other people can't see. In the boardroom, they will sit back and stay quiet and not say anything, and therefore you're losing an opportunity. So again, understand the gifts that each person brings to the table and get them, draw that out of each of them, so that they can have that voice, as you say, Karen, speaking up when they need to speak up, not leaving it until it's built up and it comes out the wrong way, but having it when they first feel it, so it's said the right way. And having those conversations, Pauline, as you said, the magical conversations, getting together and discussing that in that early stage, and looking at the infinite game, the end target of where we're going, not looking at, well, what are we doing right now, and having that competition.
Yeah.
So I think, and you guys have brought up some really great things. And, you know, with John was also talking about, one thing I really liked is, as you said, some of your staff, if they can't make it that day, they can swap with somebody else. You only have that when you have, as you said, Karen, trust within the organisation.
We create a culture.
Yeah.
And a family-based culture, like which we've done, and it's it works, and we've had that for 10 years, and it's you know, there's not a, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you know, it's just everyone. We have social gatherings. Everyone loves to get together. Everyone, like, when they have a change of shift, they usually hang around and talk for an hour because they're mates.
Nice.
You know, so it's good. It's good.
Well, that's a community, which, when we break it down, is come in unity. So it's that's great.
I like that.
I like that.
I love the way you take
all
those,
the time.
Karen, and break them down, and
I break them down. Yeah.
like together.
Yeah. To get her.
To get her.
Yeah. Well, I find that when we do get women, that's when we all will truly come together. And it's not just men understanding women, it's women understanding women as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, and realising that we don't have to get her as in bring her down. We actually just have to understand her, and then we can go, okay, no, there's no wrong, there's no right. It's just, it's okay.
It's okay, and it's all about listening.
It does. It comes down to listening. And
We've
most
got two ears and one mouth.
And I say you've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. Don't just rely on the audio. Use the visual as well, because you'll pick up so much more.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I've loved it. It's been really great, because I wanted to, as I said, get the panel started with the women and everything else. And because we had, I've interviewed quite a few women, but we had school holidays and everything else came up, and some of them are off camping and other things, you know, I mean, what they're out there in nature. They couldn't be here today, so I thought, right, asked John to come on with me. Some people might think that I just needed moral support. But,
It's a good balance.
But as I said, the whole thing, and this is where I want all the panel discussions to go, is to have men and women together, so we can have these meaningful conversations and magical conversations, so that we start to understand, hey, there are differences, but those differences need to be celebrated.
Yes.
They need to be, how can we actually nurture those? Because as you were saying, teams are made up of people with different skills. So we don't make teams out of people who are the same, because nobody will be doing anything, because they're all doing what they want to do, and they'll be fighting with each other. So people who we usually fight with, who are completely different to us, are the ones that really enhance our team. God, we look at things really the wrong way around.
Yes.
So we need to start changing the way we're looking at things. But I really want to thank all of you today for being on here and having the chat. And I'd love to have you back again on future Campfire panels as well.
I'd love to come anytime to your campfire, and it's fantastic to meet you, John and Karen. It's been a
thank
delight.
you. Likewise, Pauline and John. Thank you.
Yes, same, Karen, Pauline, Alan.
So make sure you keep that fire burning,
Yes.
Alan.
You notice how it stokes itself as well, so that's pretty good. The birds keep coming back over my shoulder there, which is really good as well. But for everybody else who's been listening today, the reason for bringing these panels together as well is to get the conversations, but also like the one-on-one conversations I have, is for you to be able to see who's out there, like the people who are here today, and connect with them. And if you have questions, get in touch with all of them. You know, if you resonate more with John or with Karen or with Pauline, get in touch with them, have a chat and see how they can help. And I also encourage all three of you as well, if you have, when your next book comes out, Pauline, for instance, I want to promote it here as well, because you guys are doing great work helping other people. And therefore, instead of people going off to the yellow pages to try and find somebody who can help them they don't even know anything about, they can come here to somebody that they've connected with, who heard talk, and feel that, hey, I resonate with this person. So if you have events coming up, if you have services or the books or whatever that will help people, I'd like you to start posting those in the Campfire Project as well.
I would love to.
As I said, it's all about we together, and it's all about everybody helping to support each other.
Totally.
So again, thanks all three of you for being here today, and thank you everybody else for listening in, and we'll see you on the next panel discussion. Bye for now.
Bye.